Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to AntiKing. I hope you enjoyed my last video. Today I'm going to be switching things up and take a look at something non-political, not focused on any social issues or anything. So today we're going to be taking a look at the 1973 cult classic, The Baby.
The Baby is a horror film from director Ted Post and writer Abe Polsky. The film stars a relatively unknown cast of Anjanette Comer, Ruth Roman, Mariana Hill, Suzanne Zinner, and David Manzi. The plot is centered around a social worker who investigates an abnormal family, which includes a 21-year-old man they call Baby, who they treat as such. The movie is outright bizarre and hosts some strange sexual undertones, so heads up for that. It's an absolute roller coaster filmed inside of a fever dream, and despite its sometimes off-putting beats, it is genuinely suspenseful, and its twist ending is legitimately surprising. The movie begins with a sequence of a lady looking through black and white childhood pictures, where we see Baby throughout different adolescent stages. It's a great sequence set to somber music that shows us that while Baby's body grows, his infantile lifestyle remains the same throughout. The film cuts away to a shot of Anne, our protagonist, getting her first look at the Wadsworth house, where she's greeted by a pigtail-wearing Alba before meeting matriarch Mrs. Wadsworth at the door. Mrs. Wadsworth invites Anne inside, and Anne explains that it's simply a routine visit. Mrs. Wadsworth asks if Anne will be assigned to Baby's case, to which Anne replies she actually went out of her way to seek this particular assignment. Anne asks why Baby was never given a legal name, but is interrupted by Germaine, and if you're into 70s hair, boy is this a treat for you. Germaine introduces herself and shrugs off Anne's attempts at niceties. Anne asks about the finances in the house and why they've been struggling to make ends meet despite her ex-husband's pension.
Isn't there any money from your husband's pension? Or his social security?
Well, how could there be?
She thinks he's dead.
Mrs. Wadsworth calls her ex-husband weak and insults him, saying he ran out on them when the family needed them most, around the time Baby was born, and that he's dead to them. Anne asks to see Baby before she leaves, which the Wadsworth reply to with withdrawn apprehension, but Mrs. Wadsworth relents and explains he's taking a nap and leads Anne to the nursery. We get our first shots of a full-grown Baby in his crib, which I'll warn you now, never gets less uncomfortable to look at. Also, isn't Baby supposed to be 21? Because the man in that crib is 50 years old and you can't convince me otherwise. Anyways, the movie cuts to a scene of Germaine feeding Baby, where Anne asks if she can have a turn, before quickly cutting again to Mrs. Wadsworth and Anne having a conversation as the former rubs lotion on Baby's legs. Anne points out that his legs look completely normal, and she's surprised he can't walk. Mrs. Wadsworth changes the subject and inquires about Anne's interest into Baby. Anne explains it away as Baby being special. We cut again to a scene in Anne's boss's office, where he's looking over Baby's case file. Her boss chastises her for devoting so much time to Baby, and not her other cases, and encourages her to ease off a bit. Anne responds by saying that they are responsible for the criminal negligence that is occurring, and that previous caseworkers had not spent enough time to uncover what was happening at the Wadsworth house, including one who seemingly disappeared as soon as things began to come to light. We cut to Anne pushing Baby on a swing and remarking to Germaine how intelligent Baby seems. Germaine looks on nervously as Anne continues to play with Baby, before Alba shows up and practically drags Baby out of there for a nap.
I'm getting sick of this nothing, no thing. Come on.
Like, damn lady, take it easy, he's just a middle-aged baby. Germaine sees Anne to her car, asking her about her husband on the way. Anne explains that her husband was an architect. Germaine asks why Anne said was, and Anne changes the subject. She asks Germaine when Baby last saw a psychologist, and Germaine says he hasn't since he was a baby, saying that they didn't see a need for them. Anne gets in the car, and Germaine says her farewells with one of the most intense smiles I've ever seen. In the next scene, we see Anne looking at a slideshow of pictures of her with some Spock meets Jim Jones looking guy. Although it's not said outright, context lets us know this is probably her husband, and something bad has happened to him.
We were so beautiful together. Why did it have to happen?
A woman named Judith, who I think is supposed to be her mother-in-law, comforts her with a hand over the mouth and an awkward behind-the-back hug as she laments how her husband's accident was her fault. The movie cuts back to the Wadsworth house as the babysitter is having an important phone conversation.
Now, what kind of a question is that? Of course I'm wearing panties, don't I always?
Damn, stop being so thirsty. Don't you hear Baby crying?
Baby's crying.
She hangs up the phone and checks on Baby, finds him crying in his crib. Again, there's just something so uncomfortable about seeing a grown man in full infant cosplay. But don't worry, it gets a lot more uncomfortable. Anyways, the babysitter awkwardly changes Baby's diaper as he starts to throw a fit. The babysitter eventually relents and lets Baby out of his crib, and eventually he hits his head playing with a teddy bear. As the babysitter tries to comfort him, he awkwardly starts trying to breastfeed, like babies do. Eventually she gives in and lets him. Again, dude, this movie is so strange. The Wadsworth return home and walk in on the scene, and needless to say, aren't happy. Although the babysitter insists nothing happened.
With your damn tit in your mouth, and you call that nothing?
The Wadsworths team up to beat the living hell out of the babysitter, which I mean, yeah, best case scenario, she was trying to breastfeed a stranger's kid. They throw her out as Mrs. Wadsworth consoles the hysterical baby. The next day, Anne arrives at the Wadsworths, where Alba gives her the cold shoulder. Anne talks to Alba and says she'd like them to be friends, and that she needs her to cooperate so that she can help her brother. Alba is not very receptive to that and dismisses Anne, saying,
Baby was born backwards. He's been that way all his life. And that's all there is to it.
The phone starts ringing inside the house, and Alba reluctantly leaves Baby in the care of Anne to answer it. Anne tries to get Baby to stand until Mrs. Wadsworth interrupts and gets onto her, telling her Baby is too delicate for her to be experimenting with. Mrs. Wadsworth questions Anne's motivation, and Anne suggests putting Baby in a clinic for people with developmental problems. Mrs. Wadsworth dismisses this idea, saying she's not prepared for the disappointment that would come with him not seeing any improvement. She asks Anne to show her why she thinks Baby has the potential to improve, and Anne tosses a ball and asks Baby to bring it back, but Baby sees his mom watching and is hesitant to do so. Mrs. Wadsworth isn't impressed, and Anne pleads with her to let him go to the clinic. Mrs. Wadsworth agrees to consider it, and the scene concludes with her scorning Baby and telling him to get inside.
Alright, I feel like now is a good time to interrupt and let you catch your breath, because things are about to get so much weirder. The movie starts to move more towards a traditional horror suspense type movie here, and things really start to kick into high gear with the plot. If you felt uncomfortable with the movie up to this point, I promise you things aren't about to get better.
The movie quickly cuts to a scene of Alba torturing Baby with a cattle prod, reminding him that
Baby doesn't walk. Baby doesn't talk to strangers.
Germaine interrupts Alba's punishment, and the two briefly argue before Mama Wadsworth shows up and gives Alba a taste of her own medicine. We cut to another uncomfortable scene, this time of Germaine visiting Baby in the middle of the night wearing lingerie before stripping and crawling in his crib. Nothing is shown, but again, it's worth noting the strange sexual undertones throughout this movie. Meanwhile, we see Anne at the clinic for handicapped children, where she talks to her boss again about the case. She gives a well-written dialogue about Baby's situation.
Can you think of anything more horrible than being buried alive? Well, that's what's happened to this client. He's been imprisoned by a kind of sick love. Here's a normal, full-grown man, trapped, with no way out.
She explains that she thinks Baby is a normal man who is just encouraged not to develop by the family's negative reinforcement. She theorizes that Baby's dad leaving had an impact on Mrs. Wadsworth that she never got over, and she's taking revenge on the only male member of the family. Thanks for the exposition, Anne. She concludes by saying she doesn't have enough evidence for the case, and we cut to her boss's office as they wait on the Wadsworths. She calls Germaine, who tells her Mrs. Wadsworth has changed her mind, and that she should reach out to her supervisor. Anne hangs up the phone and calls her supervisor, who informs her the Wadsworths have filed a complaint against her. She gets off the phone distressed and rushes out of the office and heads straight for the Wadsworth house, where she's greeted unpleasantly by Mrs. Wadsworth. She berates Mrs. Wadsworth and lets her know she'll be fighting Mrs. Wadsworth for the legal custody of Baby.
You damn bitch.
Anne arrives at home where Judith tells her she has a missed call from Mrs. Wadsworth. Also, she's building a moat or something. Anyways, she calls Mrs. Wadsworth back, who apologizes for her actions earlier that day, and tells her she's willing to cooperate with her. The two agree to forget about the situation, and Mrs. Wadsworth invites her to a birthday party for Baby. Now we're at the birthday party, and Germaine's hair is bigger than ever. Anne is approached by Dennis, who has some unusual interests.
I'd like to pay you a sincere compliment. You've got beautiful skin.
Don't tell me you're a dermatologist.
No, just a skin freak.
You can tell this was made a long time ago because the only natural reaction to something like that is to just run immediately. But anyways, Dennis follows her around and pesters her about her husband, and Anne lets him know he was in an accident. Germaine rescues Anne, and Dennis partakes in some awkward 70s dancing. Anne wants to talk to Mrs. Wadsworth, but she stalls her and walks away. Some more party shenanigans ensue as Mrs. Wadsworth gives Germaine a nod, which is a signal for her to give Anne a lace drink. Anne beats Alba at darts, but starts to feel the effects. She faints, and Alba and Germaine take her to quote-unquote sleep it off. They instead take her to the basement, where she's tied up by the Wadsworth sisters. Dennis sees them taking Anne somewhere and goes to investigate. Alba goes to distract him with a dance, and Germaine and Mrs. Wadsworth follow. While they're distracted, Baby sneaks into the basement where Anne is tied up. Alba has some more fun with her apparent pain kink as Anne struggles to get untied. She eventually does with the help of a nearby saw as the Wadsworths see their guest out. Anne attempts to escape with Baby, stopping by the kitchen to grab a knife. Alba finally throws out Dennis, and the three Wadsworths head into the basement to finish up with Anne. They find she's not there and rush outside just in time to see Anne speeding off with Baby on board. They try to chase after her in their car, only to find the tires slashed.
Tricky bitch.
She punctured it.
She thinks of everything.
Back at Anne's house, Judith seems strangely comfortable with Baby joining the family. After a short talk, Judith leaves as Anne sets up a photo shoot with Baby in his new suit. She takes a picture of Baby standing, and we see the Wadsworth receiving a copy in the mail, along with a note telling them that she's working on turning him into a full-grown man. They devise a scheme and set out to find Anne. They find her car and investigate the house. Germaine sneaks around one side of the house, while Alba sneaks around the other. Germaine finds Baby's teddy bear and decides to sneak into the house. She sneaks through the house, gun drawn, and hears Baby and Anne. We see a brief glimpse of Alba investigating the moat thing before cutting back to Germaine following the sound of Baby's cries as Alba makes her way through the back door. This whole sequence is genuinely suspenseful, as the music and quick cuts to a nervous Mrs. Wadsworth really ratchets up the tension. Tired of waiting, Mrs. Wadsworth eventually gets out of her car and heads into the house. A drop of blood falls on her face and she finds Germaine dead on the banister at the top of the stairs. She rushes to her to find her throat slit, and just then Alba emerges from a room in the background, having just taken a knife to the back. Anne appears with a hatchet, and her and Mrs. Wadsworth fight until she gets a hold of the hatchet and chases Anne downstairs. Her and Anne play hide-and-seek in a dark room before Anne disarms Mrs. Wadsworth with a fire poker and promptly chases her with it. Judith appears and traps Mrs. Wadsworth at the top of the stairs, leading her to jump off and scratch her face somehow, I guess. More significantly, she's broken her legs. Anne stops Judith from killing Mrs. Wadsworth and tells her to tie her up. They drag her out to the moat and begin to bury her alive next to her daughters.
Can you think of anything more horrible than being buried alive?
Thanks for the foreshadowing, Anne. Anne takes Baby out of a closet and into another room for the big reveal. In that room is Anne's husband in full baby regalia, and the bandage on his head implies that the aforementioned accident has left him with the same condition as Baby. As it turns out, Anne's interest in Baby wasn't as selfless as she made it seem. She wanted a playmate for her baby husband. The movie ends with a scene of them all playing by the now filled-in pool, which I was super disappointed to find out wasn't a moat, as Judith looks on.
So that was it. That was 1973's The Baby. While it's a strange adventure to say the least, I think the movie has a lot to say regarding the selfishness of parenting and the possessiveness that can be almost inherent within it. The sexual undertones lost me. I honestly could not pick up what they were going for there. Maybe I missed something. But it seems like you could take that stuff out and have the exact same movie. Maybe it was a commentary on Freudian psychology, or maybe it was just some dudes in the 70s being weird for the sake of being weird. Either way, it was a fun and peculiar watch, and it's worth checking out, if only for some laughs.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you liked it. Every now and then I want to sprinkle in some non-political content, just to help my sanity from constantly taking close looks at some of the most fucked up things in life. Please like and subscribe and turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments what you thought about the movie. Anyways, until next time, be safe and wear a mask.